Hi, podcast subscribers and listeners, and a big hello to the lovely ones of you who pledged their financial support. Thanks to you, we are community funded. We remain unfunded by government or corporation, something of which we are very proud. You may or may not know that you can watch our weekly show, The Laura Flanders Show, on CUNY TV, Free Speech TV, Link TV, and at our website, lauraflanders.org, free. And thanks to your generous support, we are on our way to airing this program on American public television this fall, which means that even more people will have access to our sort of solutions-oriented journalism. If you have yet to join our team by becoming a member, you can always make a one-time donation at lauraflanders.org/donate or become a partner and commit $3 or $5 a month, as so many of you have. That's at our Patreon site, patreon.com/The LF Show. And don't forget, partners have access to audio exclusives, including uncut interviews from our Forward Thinking on COVID-19 series. Again, that's lauraflanders.org/donate. Help keep us putting the naysayers to shame. And thank you. Here's this week's show. Hi, I'm Laura Flanders, and this is The Laura Flanders Show, the TV and radio program that seeks to raise radical spirits by interviewing forward-thinking people with real-life models of shifting power from the few to the many in the worlds of arts, entrepreneurship, and governance. This week on the show, what if farm workers could become farm owners? If the COVID-19 crisis has taught us anything, for many it's been a fresh appreciation of those who work our farms. But what if those who work them could become those who own them? I speak with Francisco and Juan Farias and Rigoberto Bucio, two who have long labored in the fields, about what it's taken to become owners of their own farms. We hear about an incubator program that helps, one of many that's out there these days, and speak to author-activist Laura Ann Minkoff-Zern about why helping this transition for a whole new generation of farmers would be good for all of us, those of us who eat and those who care about our food system.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Francisco Farias.
Hello, good morning. My name is Francisco Farias, and I'm glad to be here with you this morning. We're here in Burlington in the state of Washington, and this is Farias Farm.
Has farming been a long time in your family, Francisco?
Sí, mi papá.
Yes, my father, he was a farmer in Mexico in the state of Michoacan. And he dedicated himself to farming and raising cattle. In 1996, I arrived in Washington and started to work for an organic or vegetable farm. And I liked that very much. In 2017, I decided to take a class in a Viva Farms program, where they help give you the tools to start your own business. You can also rent some land to start a small business.
Viva Farms is an incubator program that's been getting some media attention recently. It's one of those that helps farm workers become owners. And in this promotional video, they explain how.
Our mission is to train, beginning farmers and support them with land, with infrastructure, with equipment, assistance with markets, and also assistance with capital. Here in Skagit County and across the Northwest and even across the country, agriculture is in jeopardy on some level because farmers' average age is 58. The question was, well, how do new people that want to become farmers get started? And so, there was a group of people that came together here locally and said, well, what's the biggest barrier? And in the beginning, it was, well, land's the biggest barrier, so let's solve the land issue. And quickly discovered that it wasn't just land, it was, the rest of what we call the essentials. We have the tractors and we have the land and we have the infrastructure that folks can use. So, Viva is kind of that, it is, an incubator where folks can start with the support around them so they can become successful. Maybe their kids will be farmers as well. One of our largest contingents are Latino folks, so we offer all the programs we offer bilingually. And one of our primary missions is to actually help farm workers become farm owners.
Este es mi segundo año.
It's the second year here.
Francisco is a farmer leasing land from Viva after going through their program. He only speaks Spanish, so we're talking to him through his interpreter.
Viva taught me different things about managing my business, about organic certification, and also helped him learn like how to drive tractors, how to drive the tractor on the highway in particular. So all kinds of things like that would have been hard to learn on his own.
Approximately 40% of our participants over time have actually been previous farm workers that have now started their own businesses here.
Francisco Farias, farmer.
Mi decisión fue porque yo siempre
I made my decision because I always liked the idea of managing my own ranch. I really like managing a ranch, and I wanted to do it for myself. In 2018, my brothers and I decided to expand, and we rented more acres, and now we have 8 or 9 acres that are probably already producing. And you could say that we're already beginning to be a sustainable ranch that is working on its own.
So, Juan, a question for you. You see how difficult it is for lots of farmers to become farm owners. What difference does Viva make? What difference does that program make to farmers like yourselves?
I think the benefit of going through a program like Viva is that they do provide, that hands-on experience, and then they also provide a lot of resources here in the community, and they can also help you find buyers, and they have a CSA, so they purchase from the farmers that farm from them as well. And then another benefit is also that they start you out with a half acre. They provide everything that you need to get started, like tractors, you can rent them, water, which is a big one. So they provide the infrastructure, and then you just provide the produce. And then if you like it, you can stay with them a little bit longer, and you can increase the size of land that you're renting. But yeah, it's a good place to start out. Give it a try. See if it's for you, and if it's not, you're not going to lose a lot of money.
Dr. Laura Ann Minkoff-Zern, author, The New American Farmer.
I actually started my work as an academic in Guatemala. I did work on a permaculture farm down there in my early 20s, and that's where I first started to be really interested in sustainable agriculture and the types of farming methods that took advantage of people's traditional farming ways. And when I came back to the United States to work in farming in California, what I saw was the farmers that I was working with in Guatemala were essentially, the same groups of people that were farming but as workers in California. And I started to see the commonalities between the farm workers in the U.S. And Mexican and Central American farmers. And essentially the fact that they came with all this agricultural knowledge and background. And they're not just people that are coming to work. They're not just laboring bodies, but they're farmers. Right? Even if they don't own their own businesses, they are farmers.
Take me back before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, because if I'm reading your work right, you weren't underestimating the challenges that contemporary agriculture faces, but you were feeling maybe a little glimmer of hope, of optimism?
So when I completed the research for this book, it was early 2016. And as I write about, Trump was on the horizon. We knew that he was potentially going to be the Republican candidate, but it was a very different moment in the United States politically, particularly in terms of rural communities and agriculture. The book is about, somewhat of a community that I think there is a lot of hope for, people that we should be paying attention to regardless of the moment that we're in, that are providing a really interesting future for what should be happening in agriculture, I think, in terms of sustainability and social justice.
How has it changed?
There wasn't the sense of fear among the immigrant community and among the farm worker community that there is now. There was the sense that while there were deportations, people living in rural communities didn't have as intensive a sense of raids coming down, that they would need to be afraid in their workplace in the same way that they are now, that they would be targeted for racial bias the way that they are now. And so I think there was a sense that, you know, even if undocumented, that they could use opportunities, they could be out in a marketplace selling, they could be a business owner, you know, they could kind of live this quote unquote American dream, as problematic as we know it is. You know, a lot of farm workers were trying to move in that direction.
Your core point in the book is that who is an American farmer is changing. It's been disproportionately white men. I think you say a third of them over the age of 65. Something is shifting. What is that shift that's happening as you've documented in the New American Farmer?
So what we have is a real generational shift going on right now for very good reason. The children of what the USDA calls traditional farmers, which is, like, as you said, the white US born farmers, they don't want to take on the family farm because it's economically just such a, you know, it's such a difficult business to be in. They're failing more than surviving, and that's even, you know, the mid and large scale farms. So as we see those farmers age out, the question is who's going to take over that farms? And, you know, there's kind of either they consolidate and they sell out to the next neighbor farmer, it becomes a big farm, or someone else that's coming in to purchase the land, they go under. Or another thing that we're starting to see happen is farm workers, people that don't own the property, don't own the farm business, but are doing a lot of the majority of the labor, at least on fruit and vegetable farms, are coming in and getting access to rented land, or in some cases purchasing the businesses from the owners. And I argue that the reason that this is happening is because, as I talked about before, they're here with so much knowledge around agriculture, right? They're not just people that are here being told what to do and doing, you know, it's considered unskilled labor, but it's incredibly skilled labor. And so they come here with an agricultural background, and they're really, in a lot of ways, in the best position to be moving into farm ownership positions.
This is the Laura Flanders Show. I'm Laura. That was Dr. Laura Ann Minkoff-Zern, the author of The New American Farmer, Immigration, Race, and the Struggle for Sustainability. We'll hear more from her later in the show. You're listening to our special Farm Worker to Farm Owner, exploring where racial justice and food justice meet. You can watch this special report at our website, lauraflanders.org, which is also where you can subscribe to our newsletter to keep up to date on all our programming, especially our online exclusives like the Forward Thinking on COVID-19 series and the news of our upcoming syndication to PBS. Again, that's lauraflanders.org. Next, we'll hear about California's Alba Farms, a place of learning and advancement for low-income and aspiring farmers seeking a better life. One of those farmers we'll meet is Rigoberto Busio of Busio Organic Farms, who went from working the fields as a migrant worker to leasing his own land thanks to the Alba Farms model. But first, here's Rise the Vibration by KlevaKeys, featuring Diamond Dancer from the 10 years of KlevaKeys anniversary collection, courtesy of House Keys Records.
Raise your vibration. The higher frequency will prevail if you allow it. What is your frequency? 310, willingness. 350, acceptance. 400, reason. 500, love. 540, joy. 600, peace. 700 and above, enlightenment. Raising the vibration is about what we do every day. The little choices we make, often ones we don't think even matter. What would happen if you decided to be kind to someone, especially after they were just rude to you? Raising the vibration is doing the right thing, even when others think you're crazy. Like picking up trash the person you're conversing with just threw on the ground. Raising the vibration, someone else may rethink humanity from that small gesture. Unforeseen occurrences happen to us all. Sometimes the mistake is ours. Choosing acceptance over anger or shame is raising the vibration. Listen to reason. Raise your vibration by not arguing with your body. Raise your vibration. The higher frequency will prevail if you allow it.
California farmer Rigoberto Bucio knows how to grow perfect strawberries. After many years as a farm worker, he's now in his 6th year as an independent farmer at ALBA, the Agriculture and Land-Based Training Association in Salinas. Since the program's inception in 2002, over 100 graduates have launched their businesses from ALBA's fields.
We work largely with Latino farm workers who don't have many economic alternatives, don't have any employment alternatives.
Hola Francisco, ¿qué tal?
Very hardworking people who are quite entrepreneurial. They come to our program and get education on how to run a business, on how to do organic farming, and how to keep up with all the regulatory compliance issues that are in California's competitive agribusiness industry. And over the course of several years, they established their farms here before transitioning off and being independent farmers.
Aprendí trabajando en esto. I learned this work when I was very, very young. And I learned that I enjoyed it, and I didn't really have anything else to do. So I kept doing it. I worked right here in Alba. I heard and learned about the PEPA program, and I got in. And now here I am as a farmer.
So describe a little bit about what your life was like when you were a worker, before you became a farmer owner.
I worked with a routine that was the same routine that I have now as an owner and a farmer, but it was different. I had to wake up at certain hours every day to be at work. I had to work continuously on a daily basis. Otherwise, you couldn't live. I mean, you couldn't get by.
What was the most difficult part? Was it learning the skills, the business acumen? What was the challenge?
I think of all of the challenges, the biggest one is that you start with nothing. And you have to create everything. And you don't know how to get some things or other things, really anything. And the biggest challenge for me and for us small farmers is money. I'm out of Alba. I've been out of Alba for 4 years now. And I'm realizing what it's really like to be a farmer.
What do you think your generation of farmers brings to agriculture here in the United States and to the food system?
Food, sustenance, something that can be generating jobs, and the satisfaction of giving, serving food, not to a lot of households, but to as many people as possible within my capacity and the capacity of every small farmer. So if there were many people who think like this, who love this about small farmers, it would be a perfect world. But the reality is that it's not.
You go on to talk about the structural barriers that make it very difficult for many of these farmers to survive. Could you talk about some of those? On the one hand, there are some interesting programs, FarmLink and others, that you describe, but on the other are some fairly serious and high structural obstacles.
Absolutely.
Dr. Laura Minkoff-Zern.
Well, the first is just capital to invest. Depending on the type of farming you're doing, you have to rent the land, you need some type of machinery, you need trucks to get to market, you need to pay for permits. Right, you just need money to start a business, period. So when you're looking at farm workers that are, some of them make as little as $12,000 a year if they only can work seasonally, and they come here with debt, there's the barrier of just being able to start a business, right, which is related to the history of discrimination that they've experienced. And then once they get here, even if they can start a business, what we've seen and has been proven through multiple court cases is that the United States Department of Agriculture has a long history of discrimination of, what they title Hispanic Latino farmers against African American farmers, against female farmers, that they've admitted to, right? And the cases that they've admitted to are very specific to particular time periods and particular processes. But what that shows us is that there is this history of them not looking at people of color and not looking at women as legitimate farmers and not giving them the same access to loans and grants and just assistance.
We've interviewed Shirley Sherrod from Georgia on this program and heard a lot about the movements among black farmers that had to assert themselves to get any justice at the USDA. The names Fannie Lou Hamer and Grover Washington Carver are relatively well known. Is there a comparable movement among Latinx farmers to connect racial justice and social justice with farming justice and the right to the land?
You know, it's an interesting question, and it's one that I thought about a lot while doing this research. And I would say, in comparison to the movement for African American farmers' rights and rights to the land, which have such a strong history, I have not seen the same thing in the Latino Latinx community. And I think a lot of that comes from the language barriers. A lot of it comes from being a new immigrant population. A lot of it, comes from kind of the active movement history being more tied to labor than land access. So I don't think we have these same figureheads that I can give you examples of. That said, I think that is shifting. So there are organizations in California, in Florida, that are starting to connect, in particular, connect the farm labor struggle, which has gone through kind of ebbs and flows with success over the past 30 years, to the land struggle. So I do think that that's changing. I do think there's more intersectional work being done among kind of the new and beginning farmer movement to address structural discrimination and structural racism within their own community, so particularly among the young farming community. But what I found with the immigrant farming community is they were still really sidelined from a lot of mainstream organizing in the United States due to cultural barriers and due to language barriers, and due to being so physically isolated as well. And I talked to a lot of farmers about this, and I said, well, are you interested in joining an organization or becoming politically active? And most of them said no. They said, no, I kind of just want to be a farmer. I just want to do my thing. So there's a lot more to tease apart with that. And it's something I wish I had asked more about, but I didn't see a strong desire to be really politically active. And I think part of that comes from some of them being undocumented and being part of undocumented communities and the fear in getting politically active. So while I think there's a lot of commonality, especially historically, between the African American and immigrant farming communities in terms of the same types of struggles, I think the movement is coalescing in different ways.
The last data that I saw said that 83% of people who labor in the farms are Latinx, Latino, Latina, but Latinx people only own 3% of farms. So if you have that much know-how and experience and willingness to work, how do you explain how small the number of farms are that are owned by Latinx people in the U.S.?
Francisco Farias, farmer.
Because we, as Latinos, we're not used to thinking about, we don't think about growth and owning our own businesses. We think more about working and earning a paycheck so that we can support ourselves. Starting a business, we all know, is a big responsibility, but you need to save up first and have money to open your own business. Because everything is expensive.
I think there's a few other factors as well that go into it.
Juan Farias, Farias Farms.
The language barrier, for one, is a huge one. If you don't speak English and you want to go into business and you don't have anybody that can help you with that on a consistent basis, you're going to think you're not able to because, how are you going to communicate with other people? That's one big one. The other one is, not knowing where to find resources, that type of thing. And, not knowing how to apply for different grants, not knowing how to even get a business license or how to use technology. All those types of things are things that we don't think about, but there are serious barriers to, starting a farm business, because you can be as knowledgeable, as you can about this aspect of it, or if you on the back end don't have the ability to manage the business, get those invoices out, keep all those organic records, organize all those receipts, write out a business plan, your profit and loss statement, all that other stuff that goes on in the back end that you don't see. That's, a lot of people only think about farming. You just go to the farm and you plant stuff and then you harvest it and you do that. That's a lot of hard work. It's super hard.
would be a good idea for the USDA and other organizations of U.S. farming to make it easier for farmers like you and your brothers to enter into this business?
The country needs more farmers, it needs more food producers. You make it easier for a group of people to get into the business. They want to be there. They want to do the hard work. They want to, it's what they like. They like being outside. And if you make that easy and accessible for them, you're going to have a whole new group of people that's, providing jobs, providing food for the community, and, also contributing to the economy.
Do you think we'd have tastier food?
Creo que sí.
Anything to say to other people, perhaps right now, who are workers, about whether it's worth it to try to become an owner?
Rigoberto Buccio, farmer.
Que los sueños sí se pueden cumplir. Si no se intentan, no vas a
I think I
saber.
understand the convenience of people around the country using that phrase, in a kind of diplomatic way, that we're essential.
Te abre las puertas para mucho. Sí les diría que lo intenten.
But before this, what were we?
Funciona, van a saber que lo intentaron.
They probably did never even think about us. Today, fortunately, they do think about us, and hopefully they will continue to think about us.
Todavía estoy muy nervioso, pero si no hubiera entrado en esto, no estuviera hablando con ustedes como lo estoy haciendo ahora.
What have you found inspiring from what you've learned on these farms and as you've talked to these farmers? And what are you thinking about their lives right now, as lives for them are also hit by this coronavirus, even as they were inching towards a position of possibility here in this country?
Dr. Laura Minkoff-Zern.
If we can see this moment as, a turning point to say, not only can we not take advantage of those workers that are essential and have always been essential, but also how do we think critically about where we're sourcing our food and not going back to depending on these very vulnerable food chains, right? So what does that look like? I think it means, multiple things. One of them is immediate immigration reform, looking at people, and I'm not one to say immigration reform should address some people and not others, right? But I do think when we look at anyone we're calling an essential worker right now, well, at least within field work and food processing work, estimates are 80 to 90% of people in those positions are immigrants. And if we are acknowledging that they're essential, right, and still saying that they could easily be deported at any moment, we need to look at what's wrong with that system. So I think, right, for one, we need massive immigration reform that recognizes the importance of the food system in that reform and gives amnesty to those workers and creates a real system for how we've become dependent upon vulnerable workers, right? How did we even get here is something people need to be thinking much more seriously about. And then as far as the food chain, I do think this is an opportunity for small scale and medium-sized regional food systems to be strengthened. And again, that can be done through support from the USDA, support through our federal and state governments to make sure that these are the farmers we're subsidizing. These are the farmers that are getting the supports we need, that farmers markets become places that everyone can afford to go and easily access. Right? They can't be elitist places for consumers. They need to be more accessible. And how do we make it so our whole food chain is stronger, both in terms of the workers that are in it and in terms of the food actually getting from the field to people's plates in a healthier and safer way? And I think we are in a moment we could make that shift, right? If the momentum is there, if the policymakers are there, because the awareness is there.
You can watch this special Farm Worker to Farm Owner report and find all the episode notes that went into it at patreon.com/The LF Show. That's where our members find our Forward Thinking on COVID-19 series and get special invitations to extra live events. Check out the patreon.com site and decide whether membership is for you. We hope it is, because your support keeps all of our programming free. You get a few extras if you become a member, but essentially all of our programming goes out to television and radio and as a podcast free. So if you're able to give a little, do it. It helps others. Thanks anyway. Until the next time, stay kind, stay curious. I'm Laura.